Welcome to Season 3 of Locker Room for Growth, a show with human-centric conversations that include compelling stories, unique professions, and those who set the tone for living with a positive attitude. I'm your host, Debbie Elicksen. Please subscribe to the show and check out our past episodes and clips. Follow me on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Threads, and more. Now let's meet our next guest. He flew over 3,750 fighter hours with 1,240 arrested landings on multiple aircraft carriers. He completed 5 tours at the Pentagon. Former Top Gun fighter pilot and retired 2-star Admiral Mike Manazir spent 36 years in the United States Navy with 15 overseas deployments. His duties included Deputy Chief of Naval Operations, Warfighting Systems. Today, Manazir is Vice President of Navy Systems, Government Operations for the Boeing Company. He's also a sought-after speaker. His book, Learn How to Lead to Win, is a collection of stories and lessons from his tenure in the U.S. Navy. Communications is key when managing high-performance teams in chaotic environments and risky operations, such as a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier like the USS Nimitz or commanding an F-14 squadron. Manazir has seen it all and then some. What he does with his books, Speaking and Message, is teach others how to lead from their heart and not their title. Please welcome Mike Manazir.
Thanks, Debbie. It's so nice to be here with you. I love the intro. Whenever somebody reads all that stuff, I always say, I want to meet that guy. That just sounds so cool.
Thank you. Before I jump in, we delayed this a day because you had to fly. But did I read that right? You said you had a 24-hour shift?
No. What
I meant was, like, what?
What I meant was when we rescheduled, could we shift to 24 hours?
Oh, okay. No,
but these days, I feel like I have a 24-hour shift. I joked with somebody the other day. They said, you're burning the candle at both ends. And I said, no, I've just thrown the candle into the fire. The whole thing's burning.
but there is, I know that in the healthcare industry, they certainly have extra long shifts, but what about pilots in general, like commercial pilots and non-commercial pilots? What is a day shift like? Like, how many hours is that usually?
Well, there's a concept in aviation called crew rest, and it is strictly adhered to. And in each of the aviation industries, it varies just a little bit. But you, of course, when you're hauling passengers around, if you're riding in the back of an airplane, you don't want your pilot up there falling asleep because he's been awake for a long time. So in the U.S. Navy, when I was flying, there was a policy for crew rest. It was the length of your flying day. And then the other one was how long after you stopped flying one day did you have to have before you started the next day? There was a prescribed amount of time to allow the aviators to get rest, and all air crews. So whether pilots up front or the naval flight officers or the support crew, but if you have a role in an airplane, then it's mandated you get rest. So in the commercial airlines, oftentimes many of us passengers are inconvenienced because we'll be waiting, and then all of a sudden the airline says, well, guess what? The crew reached crew rest limits, and so they can't fly anymore, and then the flight's canceled. And I have been on a couple of those. I understand the concept, as frustrating as it was, because it's a planning factor for the airlines, but crew rest wants to make sure that we don't have aviators or crew members, going to sleep or being too fatigued to make a decision. So in the aviation industry, you won't find long shifts like that. They're generally about 8 hours maximum crew day from the start of the first brief until the end of your last commitment. And then there's generally at least 8 to 12 hours of time before you can start the first flight related event again.
What about during theaters of war?
Yeah,
I would imagine that that gets all thrown out the window because you need to fly those sorties, right?
it does. And in all of the operations I've been involved with, I've never been in an operation where that had to be thrown out. So all of the operations that I've done related to flying, whether it's off the ship or off the, what we call off the beach here, allowed for the crew rest. We didn't get to a point where you had to make a decision, or the commanding officer had to make a decision to violate crew rest in order to get something done. That's a risk assessment decision. And definitely in time of hot war, like back in World War II, and those times when you had to turn people around faster, you're losing pilots, then that policy would be changed. I did way back in the mid 90s in the Desert Storm era. I did fly 3 months in a row, over 70 hours a month, where the flight surgeon literally has to examine you and clear you for more extended flights. And so when those high tempo ops have to happen, and the total number of flight hours you have exceeds a certain number per month, again, that's policy, then you got to be examined. I will tell you though, Debbie, I've never felt more comfortable in my life. I flew that much, 70 hours a month for 3 months in a row. That's almost as much, if not more, than what a normal Navy pilot gets in a full year, or slightly more, maybe a 15 or 18 month tour. But I was so comfortable in the airplane that I could go flying in the dark of night in a Tomcat without the primary attitude instrument, because I was so comfortable in the airplane. And because of the mission one night, I actually did that off USS Ranger, and it's like I was just comfortable because I'd flown so much. So, but anyway, yeah, they look out for you like that just to make sure we stay safe.
So why the Navy? What drew you to this to be your career?
Yeah, this is a good one. I actually write about it in the book. Everybody needs a North Star for a purpose, something that guides them in their lives. And there'll be multiple North Stars, or you'll hear people talk about, hey, I've always wanted to do this and I've gotten to do it. Well, I'm one of those guys. So when I was in 8th grade, circa 1974-ish, my dad was a Marine. We were stationed in Beaufort, South Carolina, and we went to an away football game, American football game, between Georgia Tech and the U.S. Naval Academy. And we went, since it was away from the Navy, we drove down to wherever the stadium was in Georgia Tech, or supporting Georgia Tech, wherever that is. And my whole family, so me, my brother, my father, and my mother, the four of us went to this football game, and we're seated in these cement bleachers that they used to have in the stadiums. And the midshipmen of the Naval Academy marched on, just like people would see them in the annual Army-Navy game. Pretty famous, it's all over the sports. And you see the brigade of midshipmen march on in these big ranks, and you see the Army cadets march on in big ranks. And Debbie, when the midshipmen marched on, and by the way, my dad, 1958 graduate of the Naval Academy, and I heard Naval Academy stories growing up as a kid.
So it runs in the family.
Yeah, runs in the family. And when I heard the stories, I was like, okay, that's kind of cool. That was Dad's experience. And I didn't. And now, of course, I was only in the 8th grade, but up until that time, I'd always known that he went there. But when I saw the midshipmen marched on, I went, that right there, that. I want to be one of those people. Long black coat, white hat, flash. I mean, that's my life right there. Right in that bleacher stadium, I turned to my parents and I said, I'm going to Naval Academy. I need to be that person. And Dad says, you got to go see the guidance counselor on Monday. And so literally Monday, I was in junior high school with, at the 8th grade, I went to the guidance counselor and said, I want to go to the Naval Academy. What do I need to do? And she took an 8.5 by 11 piece of notepad paper, turned it on its side, and drew 4 columns and wrote 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grades, and then wrote each course in the column that I had to take in 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grades in American high school. And I went to 4 different high schools because my dad was in the Marine Corps, 4 different high schools. And I took that piece of paper with me to every single school. And I said, I'm going to the Naval Academy. I need to do this. And so I got in. Mentors along the way, help, everything I was going to do. I'm going to the Naval Academy. That was my North Star. That's what I'm going to do. And as I got sort of in there, it became a reality in my mind, a real reality in my junior year in high school, where I'm really going to go do this. I started thinking about what I was going to do. I'm going to fly. I'm going to fly for the Navy. And for the longest time, I was going to be a Marine fighter pilot because I really respect Marines, still do. My dad's a Marine. I have red and gold blood in my veins, and there was this training thing about halfway through the Naval Academy. I got into the Naval Academy and I went there to fly. And of course, I needed to do everything else, but I'm going to fly after that. I'm going to go fly. And I won't bore the listeners with the story about how we got here, but the Marines had an extra hurdle I had to go through to fly. And I said, I don't want an extra hurdle. So I went Navy Air. And then when I decided Navy Air for my last 2 years at the Naval Academy, it just honed in on flying Tomcats, and I got a flight school slot. I was high enough in my graduating class, and the Naval Academy got a flight school slot. And I went down there. I'm going to go fly Tomcats, and I did everything possible to succeed in flight school. And that was my North Star at the time, to do that so I get Tomcats. And when I got my wings in April of 1983, there was a Tomcat slot, and I went to Miramar and flew Tomcats for most of my career. So that's how it happened.
Wow. So what is the difference between a Top Gun pilot and just a regular Air Force pilot?
Well, I won't get into the service, rivalries that we have. Everybody, we have great rivalries.
I'm sure.
Navy to Air Force, or whether it's F-14 pilots versus everybody else, or I'm joking, F-14 pilots versus F-18 pilots. What the Navy Fighter Weapons School was set up to do, or Top Gun was the slang for it, is very similar to the Air Force Fighter Weapons School. And it is to train a certain cadre of individuals deeply in every aspect of the airplane that they fly, all the weapons, the airplane itself. Back in 1969, when the very first class of the Navy Fighter Weapons School was convened at Naval Air Station Miramar, because we were losing too many airplanes in Vietnam to air-to-air combat, and it was actual parity. We had advanced airplanes and theoretically advanced pilots and backseaters, and the North Vietnamese were doing as good as we were. They were flying their airplanes better. And so they did a study and said, what are we doing? And Captain Frank Alt did the study and came back and said, hey, you need to establish a training school. And what is really interesting to me in reading all the background, Debbie, is back then in Vietnam, they never trained to fly before Top Gun. They never trained to fly the airplane, the jet airplanes, to the very edges of the envelope. We now train from when I started. That history of the Navy Fighter Weapons School and how we fly airplanes, we train to fly the entire envelope of the airplanes. In my case, the F-14 Tomcat and then the F-18 Super Hornet after that. But they didn't at the time. And so they took specially hand-selected instructors to then learn how to fly the F-4 Phantom and the F-8 Crusader using some other less capable airplanes as pseudo bad guys. And they would train how to fight those advanced fighters all the way to the edges of the envelope, pushing past what they had previously been allowed to do. And then they went very, very deeply into study on the weapons that the airplanes carried, and they knew how to employ those weapons better. We do exactly the same thing now. And what happens is the people who get trained at Top Gun then go back into their squadrons and they train the rest of the squadron. And so the concept in the Navy Fighter Weapons School and the Air Force Fighter Weapons School is train the trainers. Mm-hmm. So the instructors at those fighter weapons schools are very, very, very good. They've got great reputations. They're very skilled at what they do. And they teach the Top Gun students how all this stuff works at a very deep level in their airplanes. And then the expectation is then those graduates wearing the Top Gun patch on their left shoulder will then go and teach people that don't have an opportunity to go through Top Gun. It's a hand selection. It's very, very competitive. It always has been. It's an extremely sought after thing to go do because it's one, it's prestigious, and two, we're competing all the time, and that's just another level of competition. You get selected out of your very competitive peers to go and do that, and then it's fun because all you're doing is concentrating on flying, and if there's no ground job, you're right then for that period of time. My school was 5 weeks long. Coincidentally, I was actually in Top Gun in February of 1985 when they filmed the first movie.
Oh, really?
Yeah, right around us. And it was kind of funny to watch all that. And there's obviously movie nuances in both of those movies, but then that was only 5 weeks long. Now in the Navy, it's 10 weeks long, and it's very, very hard. The junior officers who fly in the Navy Fighter Weapons School now, and I know that the Air Force Fighter Weapons School is the same thing. They are extremely smart, and they know everything about their airplane and the weapon system. So that's what it's set up to do.
Well, and technology kind of demands that, doesn't it? Because it keeps changing and upping the ante.
Yeah.
So do the Air Force pilots also take on and off from an aircraft carrier?
No.
Do they also have to learn an arrested landing? Because I imagine that's a hell of a thing to learn.
Yeah. No, it's only Navy pilots that do that. In fact, it's very common understanding amongst people who don't know that naval aviation is who flies on and off aircraft carriers. It's very common for people to assume it's the Air Force that flies off of Navy ships.
Right.
That's not true. It's naval aviators, specially trained. Part of the training syllabus coming up through as you get trained, part of the basic training is to learn how to land on a carrier. So the first time I landed on a carrier was in 1983. Late 82 in a T2 Buckeye, which is a big fat training airplane. And part of the syllabus at the very end of it, the last thing you do is you practice landing on a field called field carrier landing practice, or bouncing. You go out and do bounces. And then you go to the ship and you get 6-day landings. And that's the last thing. If you pass those 6-day landings, then you go on to advanced jet training. You do the same thing at the very end of that. You get 6 more day landings in my case, the A4 Skyhawk. Now they do it in a different airplane, both basic and advanced. And then when you go to your fleet airplane, in my case, the Tomcat, at the end of that full syllabus, now you go out to the ship day and then night. And it's the very first time you do it at night, and you qualify. You do 12 day landings and 6 night arrested landings, 12 arrested landings at a time, 6 at night. And that's your initial qualification. And those are naval aviators. And then you'll have your wings after doing the training piece. And then you go to the fleet and fly the Tomcat or the F-18 or something, and you're a qualified carrier aviator. That's only naval aviation.
And I imagine not every ship is nuclear powered. So like the aircraft carriers, or are they? They
are now.
They are now?
Yep. Every aircraft carrier is nuclear powered. We had a mix starting when the USS Enterprise was commissioned in the early 60s. We then started to have a mix of conventional boiler fired carriers, and then also nuclear powered. There was a little bit of a delay. We had the 65 Enterprise nuclear powered, 66 and 67 the American and John F. Kennedy were conventionally powered using fuel inside boilers to heat the water. And then after that, everything became nuclear powered built. But for a while, we had a combination in the fleet of a conventional and a nuclear powered ship.
Yeah, I think I learned a little bit about the conventional way of the ships because my dad was a stoker.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. Yep. I
have his manual.
Yeah, I have a picture. There's a picture somewhere in here when I was the captain of the USS Sacramento, which was my supply ship. Looks like that right there. Looks like this supply ship. I actually got the light. We went from 2 boilers to 4 boiler ops, and I got to light the 2 boilers, and they were fuel. I think Dad Stoker would be coal or something like that. But
yeah.
all it is. I'll tell you the difference between conventional, so either coal or fuel, and a nuke is just different way to heat the water. That's it.
Right.
And it heats the water into steam, and steam runs turbines, and turbines push the ship. That's the only difference, except that it's really hard to learn nuclear power school. I mean, that's a year and a half long of training.
And there's probably less manual labor involved with the nuclear power, or
Yeah,
is there
yeah, you're probably
more
right.
mental labor?
Yeah, definitely different ratings. We don't
Yeah.
have any Stokers on a nuclear powered aircraft carrier,
No,
but
I would imagine.
the USS, so the Nimitz class carriers, which, the last one was the CVN 77, which is the George H.W. Bush. The next one is the Ford, which is a brand new Ford class, and it's built with a lot of electrical capacity. And so it's basically an electric ship. We still use the nuke to heat the water, and then it runs a bunch of electric motors. And what that did was it took out a lot of the distributed steam and hydraulic systems that normally are used to run the Nimitz class carriers, like the catapult and the arresting gear, are a huge one. And those are electromagnetic now. So those are definitely different. A lot less manual labor with those systems on Ford. So
Yeah. And so much has changed over the decades since World War II with those ships, after those ships were just decommissioned. And when my dad was in the Navy, those corvettes weren't very big, and they used to ice up, and the men used to have to like chip off the ice to kind of like save their own lives, keep it from tipping over.
Yeah.
So when you get into rough seas with the ships, are they too big to ice up like that? Or what happens when you do hit inclement weather and it's icy, and like, does the ice fall off? Or because that's an issue, right?
Mother Nature. So I'll tell you famously, I think it was the Truman within the last 5 years went up and operated in the North Atlantic above the Arctic Circle. And they were using baseball bats to break the ice off the superstructure.
Yeah.
Exactly the same as what you're talking about. And Debbie, I'll tell you, Mother Nature and the power of the sea, it doesn't matter if you're a 2,000 ton, 1,500 ton, 500 ton Corvette or a 100,000 ton aircraft carrier, you get moved and affected.
Yeah.
So, it's interesting. If you
because
get
it's heavy, it's so heavy, it will topsize you, right? Well, it used to with the older ships.
With the older ships, it will. Yeah, you
Yeah.
won't get as much weight, before the thing will like the ice itself will just collapse of its own weight and fall off. But inclement weather, in an aircraft carrier, you can obviously get into much, 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 much bigger weather than a smaller ship can. And so I've been in pitching deck seas a lot in my 15 deployments, and the carrier will be moving pretty much, and we get we'll have plus or minus 30 feet of flight deck motion and still be landing. So 60 feet of deck motion, and you're being brought down by the LSOs. But when the carrier is moving, if you look at one of the plane guard ships, like the destroyers or the cruisers that are with you, man, they are just burying into the water and then coming out. They're really just reacting like crazy. But any ship, any of the big ships is gonna still react.
Yeah, because that North Atlantic especially is very unforgiving.
Yeah, I had two in my 1986 deployment, which was my second deployment. We were in the Northern Pacific, through the Aleutian Islands, and then down into the Sea of Japan. And we came home the same way: snow, ice, fog, really bad weather. And the flight deck was all iced up and snowy. We had snowstorms on the ship, and for the first part of it, we still operated, and then it got really, really bad, and we stopped operating. But we operated when it was icy. And of course, if we go into war again, we're going to have to do that again.
Yeah, and of course, you don't have the luxury of stopping when you go into war. Yeah. There are so many cyber security threats and information warfare, from so many different sources. In your eyes, how has technology caught up to these dangers? And, or is it caught up, or is it continually trying to catch up?
Yeah, I think it's really a challenge. I'll tell you that in the cyber threat, anytime you connect outside of your, either like you and me right now, this network. Anytime you connect your network or computer system, whether it's a weapon system controlling a missile or whether it's you on your admin computer, there's a danger of cyber intrusion.
Right.
And I think as much as we wrap protections around our networks, the bad guys are looking for ways to get in still. And so we often talk about the fact that the defenders are defending all the time, and the attacker only has to get in one time, and then you're kind of screwed. He's inside. So it's a worry for any connected system. And so we've got in my current job, and then previously late in my Navy job, we would always train on just the simplest things. And believe it or not, at the highest levels of classification, when we talk about cyber threats out there, the most often thing that happens is somebody will have like password 123.
Oh my God! Still?
Oh yeah. Or to be a phishing, a sort of a phishing scam where you think
phishing email link. Yeah.
Yep. And you will click on it, and we have training. In fact, we have we have this neat little system where the good guys will send you an email that looks really valid, and then you click on it, it goes, okay, you got extra training because you clicked on this thing. I'm like, no, it was
that's a good idea.
so we're really good. I'll tell you what has, I think, changed is our understanding of what it takes to defend against that has gotten really good. We in the friendly forces are as good as the bad guys are at fighting. When we do, go into a conflict moving forward, it's not only going to be like a kinetic conflict, but it's going to be a lot of cyber to it. So we are going to want to change the enemy's perception of his own information, and the enemy's going to want to change our perception of our own information. You tweak something little, so that maybe a part destined for a place identified by a 3-letter thing, let's say, for instance, we're going to fly from here to Seattle, and we're just going to get on an airplane and fly to Seattle. And, SEA is for SeaTac Airport is our destination. And they go in there, and we get on our airplane, and somebody changes SEA to SAE and hits enter. And now the airplane's rerouted to SAE, right? So that's kind of a simplistic example of what somebody might do with just a little tweak of the information just to cause confusion. And but the other good thing is we're completely focused on that and the eventualities of cyber. We won't get rid of it. You see the stories all the time. You see people clicking on emails. You see people getting.
And we won't get into quantum and the scariness of that.
Yeah, I mean,
that's another show.
Yeah, it's another show, and I don't know anything about it, so I wouldn't be able to answer any questions. So yeah. It's a cyber's a threat.
Oh man, so there's so many threat notices. We hear about this even with the politicians and the president and prime minister, and there's so many threat notices, and they have to be massive and taxing. How do you decide which ones to act on?
Yeah, I think so. As I'm not an intel officer, I'm not an intel professional, but I have experience in command. And what we used to do was ask our intelligence sources to present to us all the information that they could gather. And sometimes the most valuable stuff they could gather for us was actually total open source, not even classified, just watching or looking or reading the papers and then kludging together all of the information you have to see if you can find any indicators. And the whole idea is to get indicators to see what what's kind of looking like it's going to happen, that kind of thing. And then you put a risk assessment to it. So, the chances of it happening and the likelihood of it happening. So we might sometimes call something the most likely enemy course of action based on our information.
Yeah. And we also on the intel that you have too, probably.
Correct. No, all of that. Right. And so all of this is based on intel. And then the other one we talk about is the most dangerous enemy course of action. So we look at the likelihood of the most dangerous. So you have the most likely based on the information, and then you put a plan for that. And then on the kind of the other end of the spectrum would be the most dangerous thing that the enemy course of action could do to us. And then we'd address that as well. So typically you'll see briefings that have those things in it, and you just have to make a decision. And then you also brief and think about the indicators. If you're moving down a road that looks like it's going to go one way or the other, is going to go, towards conflict, you've got indicators in front of you that you're kind of checking off. We see this, we know that we're moving down the threat road. Okay, now we see that next. Okay, now, and that's how you see sort of the threat postures being raised, because the intel sources and the other advisors are saying, hey, we're seeing a stack up of indicators that indicate this bad thing might happen to you. And then the commander would make a decision. The prime minister would make a decision. The president would make a decision. And then all the forces would kind of stack up and execute the friendly plan.
And then you hope everybody down the line follows their orders.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And to me, diplomacy almost seems like a pissing contest between two nations and who blinks first.
Sometimes. Yeah. And war is just the extension of diplomacy. I mean, that's what ends up happening. And so,
and there's so many, and there are so many layers to military leadership. And so as an admiral, how do you ensure your company understands the mission and follows through? Imagine you might have the odd outlier.
You mentioned that you hope the people below you kind of know what to do. You gotta definitely set up a training program. And we talked about Top Gun and how to train a cadre of really, really, really good pilots and aviators, and then they would train. And then when I had a ship or a unit, when I had my strike group in 2012 to 2013, I made sure the whole strike group, there's a whole training program that the U.S. Navy goes through in order before you send a carrier strike group to sea on deployment to go execute whatever it is they're tasked to do, the nation's tasking. And so you're trained at those levels, and you get everybody in there and train, you debrief, which is the most important part of a training evolution, is the actual debrief. And you tactically do that. But before you do that, and this is in the same thing in the business world, and I talk about this all the time, is what is our why? Like, what are we doing? What's our strategy? What are we trying to achieve? What's our mission? The strategy, the vision, what are we trying to do? The why, and then what's our mission? What are we hoping to achieve? And you make sure everybody understands that mission. And then when they do, and you train on the tactics you're going to execute, then even when it comes down to, okay, I haven't seen this before, but I know what my mission is, I'm going to go do that to support the mission, whether you're a ship commander or whether you're a manager in a factory someplace trying to do the right thing for a company. It's the same thing. You can't just go blindly into it, send an email out and go, hey, you guys, this is our plan, and then expect everybody's going to know what to do. You have to train to it. You have to brief it. You have to discuss it. You have to listen to input. Got to make sure that you're allowing people to tell you, hey, that plan's not going to work, and here's why. And so, we call it red teaming. You red team something, you red team a strategy, you war game it, in the military sense. Sometimes we use war games and red teaming in business as well to see, hey, how does our strategy stand up? Are we going to get what we're trying to achieve?
And you've said that leadership isn't what you do, but who you are. And many of the leaders are kind of hung up on the titles. So now that you're in the corporate world, what's your biggest challenge to getting leaders to lead?
Yeah, I have believed for a long time, Debbie. Now, and you read, part of my bio. So I had a bunch of, military ranks, which are hierarchical. Of course, I was a skipper, a commanding officer. I was as an admiral. Now I'm a vice president. And so with those titles comes authority. And sometimes what people do is they stick those titles on and basically, to be quite simple, they go, hey, because I'm this title, I'm wearing this on my shoulder or my collar.
Yeah.
You have to do what I say. people would ask me sometimes, well, in the military, it's easy, right? Because all you do is order people and they just do it. Well, true. I mean, if you give a lawful order to somebody, they're going to do that, but they're never going to do their best at it because they don't know why yet. And so in the military, and the same in business, is exactly the same. As people want to feel valued,
Yeah.
and they want to feel respected for who they are, what they bring, their work every day when they come to work, and they want to be part of something bigger than themselves. Those two things. And that is the same whether you are in the military or in a civilian world, in a community, any entity at all. And I've watched it over and over and over again. So in the business world, it is more effective to lead with your human-centered influence. And leadership's all about influence. And so influencing people to go with you someplace, to listen to what you're talking about and take them there, that's the trick. So how do you do that is, first of all, you have to show them you care about them. You have to connect with them at a human level. You have to be a good person to be around. And they're going to go with you. It's more human than it is title.
Yeah.
They know, the other part is they know who you are. I mean, they know who the CEO is. They know who the manager is. They know the hierarchy. They know where they fit. And it makes it even more powerful when you're willing to come down off that title step, that high horse that you hold because you wear a title like vice president, and you're down there getting you're rolling your sleeves up and getting your feet dirty and your hands dirty and doing all those kind of things. The respect for you is going to go up. Yeah, look, the boss is down here doing this. He doesn't need to be doing this. And so you lead in that way.
Yeah, it comes down to the boss not asking something of their people that they aren't willing to do themselves.
That they were willing to do themselves, and that's correct. It's become a cliche, but it's absolutely true. You asked me what I found to be the hardest. This is what I found to be the hardest: peer leadership, leading people that are level with you. You're going to do something hard. You are designated as the point of contact to do something hard. And you're going, okay, we got to go do this thing. Influencing the people who don't have to follow you is what's the hardest. And that's what I find the most challenging and where I have to do the most work. And so you really have to work on that interrelationship at the peer level. And there's a lot of pitfalls to that people, if you're really good in the business world, they'll be threatened by you. Say, well, I can't compete against that person. They're too good. And they're going to try to be the CEO. And that's the reason they're working so hard. And that's why they're doing all these good things. And, I'm not going to help her do that. They see these prejudices in the business world. It doesn't happen as much in the military, I've noticed, because there's a process of getting promoted. It's not the same as in the civilian world, but I've seen a little bit of it in the civilian world where people are really aware of who gets the credit. And so I try to teach people, it really is irrelevant who gets the credit. Be a good human. You'll be a good leader. You'll influence people. You'll get things done. Everybody's reputation will go up. And, and then you just interrelationally in your company, you just got to be a genuine person and be a trusted person and a trustworthy person. So you're not telling somebody one thing and then pulling the rug out from underneath them because all you were really trying to do was get something over on them so you could be viewed as, better for the job. But I'm aware of the business, world sort of dog eat dog kind of a thing. And you know what, I'm telling just in my study and watching, you don't get a high performing team or a high performing company if your culture is like that.
Yeah. And so you don't get retention.
Correct. People will leave. If they don't feel valued, if they feel like they can't trust inside, there's no psychological safety, they will leave. And you will have a culture of competitive dog eat dog backbiters that you ultimately, the performance of your organization will not be where you want it.
Yeah. So who is the best leader that you've ever had and what did you learn from them?
Well, I had several mentors in the U.S. Navy. They actually became 3- and 4-star admirals. And I followed them into the Navy nuclear power. They were very, very well-respected fighter pilots, the 2 people that I have in my mind's eye. And they led in this way. They led in a very inclusive manner, very positive and passionate. the empathy. I teach 3 things in leadership: communication. And so you're communicating with people directly. You got to understand, of course, feel valued and something bigger than yourself. Those are foundational. Your communication with people, empathy for people, understanding where they come from, and then passion, and just run around positive and, boom, and this is great. And somebody that's a big personality that, it's not ego driven, but it's just, hey, this is good stuff. I'm happy being here. Those 2 leaders were really the ones that exuded that in the U.S. Navy. I tried to follow that, and I have found that style of leadership attracts me and seems to attract people. When you're passionate, you communicate, you're trusting, you're vulnerable, that you show them that you're the same as them, and you're struggling too, and you'll be able to, trust each other at a human level. And I think that's what works the best.
Yeah. Yeah. Mike, thank you so much. I could talk to you for days.
This was great.
Thanks so much. This is Debbie Elicksen. Thank you to my guest and to you, the viewer, for watching this episode of Locker Room for Growth. Please subscribe to this channel and check out our past shows and clips in the YouTube playlist. The show broadcasts from Treaty 7 on Turtle Island, the traditional territory of the Blackfoot people, which includes Siksika, Blood, Piikani, Tsuut'ina, Stoney Nakoda Nations, and Métis Nation Region 3. Again, thank you for watching, and please subscribe.